Hello, welcome. It's a very grand entrance. My name's Gavin Bannerman. I'm the Director of Queensland Memory here at State Library of Queensland, and I'd like to welcome you to our Fellowship Information Night. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners and the land on which we gather tonight. It's NAIDOC Week, which I think is a really timely moment to stop, pause and reflect and celebrate that we gather on Aboriginal land and that we respect and acknowledge that ongoing and continuing connection to country and draw from that in the work that we do as a team called Queensland Memory to respect and work from that history to work forward to possibly tell new stories through our fellowships especially. I would like to just thank my colleagues. I'm standing up here doing the talking, but my colleagues Troy Keith, the legacy set by Chrissy Theodosio, who's working the doors, and a host of other people who are technically being able to pull off tonight. Basically, tonight is made possible through many people. I just want to acknowledge and thank all of their contributions. I also, which included bringing together that fantastic montage, so you might have seen some familiar faces or recognised some people in that. That's just a small taste of what people can do with a fellowship here at State Library. This isn't, I say this and I'll reiterate this message, the concept of fellowships is sometimes a bit obscure to people. I know if I didn't work at State Library, I wouldn't necessarily know what a research fellowship is. So there are no dumb questions at all. This is an absolutely safe space to ask any question that you have, which might help you put together the best application you can. We'll enable people to ask questions through the Slido platform. And I'd just like to say hello to everybody joining on our live stream. Thank you for participating and tuning in. The Slido link, if you follow that QR code, you can get to that and you can post through that. It's like a text, you can text through the questions. We'll also have a roving microphone for people if they prefer to ask those questions in person. So this event is being recorded and live streamed. So if anybody that you know couldn't make it tonight or couldn't make the live stream, we will be making this available online at a later date to assist people. So I'd just like to, the format of tonight will be a panel discussion with some people who have key involvement with our fellowship program. And then after that, there'll be the Q&A component where it's basically shoot away, like please ask any questions you wish to ask. I won't bring them on the stage yet because we still have some videos to play, but I'll just formally introduce them. So first up we have Associate Professor Jeff Ginn. He is a Senior Lecturer of History at the University of Queensland, specialising in Queensland and urban history and heritage studies. He has a long-standing relationship with State Library, including, I hear, saving the Poinciana that's out the front by Maiwa, and has recently partnered with State Library on an ARC linkage project called the Queensland Atlas of Religion, which hopefully you'll hear more about soon. Jeff has also been a judge for the Queensland Memory Awards and the Queensland Literary Awards. Tonight, Jeff will share his insights on being a judge in that process. Next to Jeff is Dr. Robin Trotter, who is an adjunct researcher at the Centre for Cultural and Social Research at Griffith University, with over 20 years of experience in lecturing and tutoring in arts and humanities. Notably, Robin has received the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame Fellowship twice, in 2021 and 2024, for her projects on Queensland business leader Sir Arthur Petfield. That's very plosive in the microphone, I apologise for that. And her current research on T.C. Dixon and Sons Boots, now the Queensland Ballet's home in West End. Recommended by last year's judging panel, Robin is speaking tonight to share her insights into being a State Library of Queensland Fellow and offer tips for writing a successful application, as she's been successful twice. Shanoa Petra, our final speaker tonight, is a Senior Project Officer at State Library. Shanoa has coordinated the two Making Meaning symposia, which focuses on the use of collections for data-driven insights and research. Shanoa is here to talk about the Digital Collections Catalyst, a fellowship to support projects using computational methods such as machine learning, generative AI, and other tools with State Library's digital collections and or collections data. So we'll hear a lot from them, we'll be able to pick their brains. I'd like to introduce just the suite, so just to kind of visually represent all of the fellowships that are on offer. So the call for applications is now open. So this is, all this information is available on our website, so feel free to go there. But this just gives you a bit of a rundown of the different fellowship categories that are available. Probably notably, there's two brand new fellowships that we're offering. One is to do with the Queensland Heritage Register, and the other one is to do with the RNA, the Royal Queensland Show. So they're two brand new fellowships, as well as our standard John Oxley Library Fellowship, the Monica Clare Research Fellowship for First Nations research, the Rainbow Research Fellowship for LGBTQI+ research, the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame, Digital Collections Catalyst, the Letty Katz Fellowship, which we offer by, I always get it wrong, once every 2 years, biennial, whatever, once every 2 years. And then we also have two recognition awards, which aren't fellowships for research about to be undertaken. They are for recognition of people who've done outstanding work in the field of Queensland history. So you're actively encouraged to nominate people for that year round, but we just have this kind of concerted period where we encourage people to nominate. So I'd like to play you now just a little video which gives some tips on being a fellow from people who've walked that walk before.
The State Library functions as a place where a whole lot of knowledge comes together, and it therefore gives people like me an opportunity to do research I otherwise would never have the chance to do.
You don't need to be a professional researcher or academic to apply.
I like the all-inclusiveness within this fellowship.
Getting that moral support from everybody here in the library and the team and the foundation is just wonderful.
There's a great team here who are really supportive about furthering the research of histories that have been silenced or otherwise might not get the acknowledgement that they deserve.
Spend a lot of time going through the collection online before you make your application.
There's always opportunities. You can come back and try again, and always dig a lot deeper to yourself. You want the project to represent you.
It's a really simple process. There was about 6 questions I had to answer with detailed information.
You don't need to be from Queensland or living in Queensland.
As long as you have the interest and the passion, the tools are there to help you through it.
It shot me off in different directions. I ended up with 3 different projects out of this. This was truly enjoyable.
So I'd like to welcome to the stage our 3 speakers. Jeff, you want to I'll bring you up one by one. Jeff, do you want to come up? Robin Trotter and Shanoa Petra. Thank you. Okay, and the link, feel free to preload questions if you want. They appear on this screen before us, so we can see the questions as they're shooting through. So if we're all comfortable, is that the mics are okay? We haven't stuffed up your whole carefully arranged microphones. So I'd like to just kick it off just by asking you, Robin, and it's something that people persistently ask, like there's when people are considering putting in an application, they wonder how being a fellow will fit in with their other life commitments, work commitments, like what is required of being a fellow. So could you just maybe give us a rundown of a day in the life of being a fellow here?
It's a juggling job. Well, especially for me because I'm working full-time as well. And getting into the library, doing my research here, it's a time when I guess I feel like a kid in a lolly shop. There's so much material and so many resources and so much backup and support. It is just an incredible experience. So I just can't recommend it any stronger than that. It is a wonderful thing to be a fellow in the State Library.
Oh, thank you. We like having you. You're amazing. Do you want to talk, how do you balance, like in terms of actual practicalities of coming in? When do you like to come in to do your research?
I try to get in at least one day a week. Ideally, I'd like to get more, but as I said, I work full time. I do a lot of my research from home as well, but being in the State Library, I've got the access to those resources, but I pull a lot of those from home and have them ordered so that they're here when I arrive. I do a lot of my work from home late at night, because that's my best working time. And as I said, I go through all the catalogue, looking for materials and order those online so that they're there when I come in.
I'll assume people know a little bit about using collections at State Library, but some people don't know, and when they walk in they say, where's all the collections, where's all the books? Because it is comparatively sparse. There is a whole repository which the public doesn't have access to, which you request material out from. So any member of the public on an hourly cycle can request material out. And that's a good tip, I think, to preload your trolley. As a fellow, you get a trolley, which material can be brought out onto, and then the material's sitting there ready for you to go, isn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
we have our own trolleys, so material's already waiting when I get in here. And by searching through the catalogue, it's amazing what stuff you can find that you didn't expect. I think it's the icing on the cake to find those little gems that are unexpected. And it's worth searching through things that you think, maybe, why should I be looking here? And then you do find something quite unexpected in another collection. I found an example the other day that I was looking for an object in my collection, and I did lots and lots of searches. And then just by sheer chance, I looked at another collection elsewhere, and lo and behold, there was the object in that collection that belonged in my collection. It's serendipity.
Do you want to talk a little bit just about, because you've been through an entire cycle of being a fellow, how, during the stages of your fellowship, there's a concerted beginning, there's a middle, and there's an end. Do you want to talk about how they're all different to one another?
I guess when I first think about a project, it's very important to kind of look at those projects that are available, the awards that are available, and select the right one. That's my starting point. Then the next thing is to go through the collection as much as I can before I even make an application, just to find out what's here and open up the avenues that I might explore. Addressing the criteria is part of that. And then I plan it all like I use concept maps, mud maps, to plan all that. My progress, the direction the project's going to take, my time frame and everything like that. So I've got it all kind of laid out before I even make the application.
Do you have anyone run their eyes over your application or a second person look at it?
No, I don't. I should. But I don't really have anyone to do that for me.
If you were to...
But I would recommend it for most people.
Yeah, if it's possible. Do you... I suppose because you have been so successful in submitting applications...
I was lucky.
No. But do you want to just... What is the... For someone considering putting in an application, what's your number one tip for that person?
Check the criteria very carefully. They're very clear. The criteria is very clearly set out, fairly broad and general, but they're all in dot points, and I just put those up in front of me, and every single thing in my application must address those criteria. So I go through it again and again and again to see them. I'm addressing all those.
Bit like points. Writing an assessment, So that information is up on the State Library website under the Queensland Memory Awards page. For each fellowship category we've presented, there's guidelines and criteria for how they'll be assessed, like a job application or anything like that.
They're fairly broad guidelines and criteria, except for a few specific ones for particular different awards, but generally pretty broad in general. But if you just focus on those and you keep it really tight, don't go down any rabbit burrows.
Don't get too creative.
Creative, yes, that's important.
Yeah.
And it is so important that you be passionate. You've got to really care about your topic. It becomes something that you live, I think, with continuously. Think about it at night. Before you go to bed, you think about it when you wake up in the morning, always thinking it through. And I think even when you're asleep, you're thinking it through because I wake up with new ideas.
I know that you developed a really close bond to Sir Arthur Petfield, in your initial research. What did you learn about him through the life of that fellowship?
You're hitting a very sensitive point here, Gavin. I chose that topic because for years I had thought there was a story about that company and about Sir Arthur, and it had always been at the back of my mind because I'd worked in the company for 30 odd years. I'd worked for Sir Arthur. And when I put the project up, I was a bit distant from Sir Arthur as a person, as a man. But throughout that year and a half, I got so much closer to that man, and it was a very personal journey and fraught with a lot of nostalgia and some pain because a lot of the people that I'd worked with were gone. But very, very moving experience.
Thanks for sharing. Thank you for going there. I suppose that is pointing out that it is emotional work, doing historical research, that you are honouring people's stories who are sometimes not with us anymore. I know Matthew Vengert, who's a John Oxley Fellow sitting in the crowd, he similarly dealt with people from the Government Printing Office, talking about their history, and that was, taking on a lot of people's memories is a big responsibility. We'll just change tack slightly, but in a similar sort of area. Jeff, you're somebody who has sat on selection panels previously. Do you want to just talk a little bit about what you're looking for? If you get that email from Troy, in a couple of weeks with the zip folder of all the applications, what makes applications stand out to you?
That's a good question. Thanks, Gavin. Well, I pick up on what Robin said, and that is the idea of having some heart in the project. It's the person proposing the work has to give us the sense that they really are committed to it, that it matters to them, that it's actually something that they have thought about and that they've planned. And in a way, we want to get a tangible sense of that, the importance of the project to the researcher. I mean, it's important that it's significant for other people as well. It's important that it's significant to the State Library and the State Library collections. It can't be a completely self-gratifying kind of thing, but it's important to pick up from the words on the page that the researcher actually cares about it. It's not just a technical thing, it's not just a professional thing. They're not just doing it to, dot the T's and dot the I's and cross the T's. It's something that they actually believe in. So I know that not everybody writes in the same way and not everybody communicates their ideas in the same way. That doesn't mean we're looking for a certain, magic style of writing an application that's going to stand out. We don't have that approach at all. But we do want to get a sense of why it matters, both to the researcher and potentially to others.
Do you want to, you professionally work in that area of historical research. Do you want to just talk a little bit about why fellowships matter? Like, what do they contribute to that broader sense of history? Yeah,
I'm just always impressed by the way the State Library handles this sort of thing, because we used to think that history was in the history department, and most people in the history department still think that history is just in the history department. We're a declining number. I'm not saying we're in constant decline, but the history departments now are much smaller than they used to be. It's just a fact. There's no point being too regretful about that. But the reality is history itself is not in decline. History itself is flourishing. It's flourishing at a community level, it's flourishing at a publishing level, it's publishing online in digital media, it's flourishing in podcasts and any number of different media. So I've never been one who signs up to that idea that history is just in the formal academic historical departments. It's actually something that exists as a social action, a social knowledge, and a kind of a social means of communication and sharing, meaning and experiences. So I guess in all of that, getting back to your question, Gavin, I think the really key thing about what the fellowships offer is a chance to go deeper in a sense of critical research and analysis and inquiry, all the things that academic historians do, but doing it in the service of understanding what history means to our communities today, which is what history's always been about. It's a dialogue between the present and the past, because we are here in the present asking those questions of the past. It's a dialogue between what we know of the past through the evidence and the kinds of things we want answered, the kind of questions we want to ask. So people who say that history is just about assembling a lot of old stuff and admiring it, that's really not what history is about at all. History is an inquiry and it's a conversation. You ask questions of the past and then you seek to develop answers. And I think we all know that the world is a fraught place. We know about globalisation and we know about a whole lot of things that might make people anxious in the present. And one of the things we're finding as a society, I think, is that our stories matter, and the stories that relate us to place and to community and to people in our part of the world, matter more and more. So even though we are in a hyper-globalised world, it's so great that the State Library continues to invest in local stories, our stories, Queensland's experience. So that's what I think is the value of it, is that it gives a chance for those sorts of stories to be understood and developed in a really fundamentally, interpretive way, getting deep into the interpretation. It's not just a glossy, superficial thing, it's actually a deep evidence-based researched inquiry.
Well, thanks, Jeff. Hopefully that inspires. I'm ready to research. I want to get in there. Thank you so much for that. Shanoa, I'd just like to ask you a little bit about the Digital Collections Catalyst. If people are curious about it, they've heard about it, but they don't quite know where to start. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what it is and what you're hoping people might put forward?
Yeah, for sure. I think usually when I talk to people about it, their first reaction is kind of like, what is that? I still don't kind of get it. I guess the thing about the Digital Collections Catalyst is a fellowship that works specifically with digital collections. It uses some kind of technological approach or computational method, and then results in a really creative outcome. I think a thing that sort of makes a really good Digital Catalyst project is sort of something that makes people think, oh wow, I wouldn't have thought to use that particular collection in that particular way, or I wouldn't have thought to use that particular tool in that particular way. And I think it's something that really encourages visitors to use our digital collections or think about how they might use our digital collections differently, which I said, that sounds kind of vague. I think usually the best way I try to help articulate that is using some of the previous catalysts as examples. So last year, Andre Mabley was one of our staff digital collections catalysts, and so he worked specifically with audio collections, so oral history, recorded oral histories, and was looking at applying generative models to look at how we might represent or understand the literal voice of Queensland. And another example is Brett Tweedy, who is the fellow from 2021. He was working specifically with a data set, which was what people search in our digital catalogue, and then using that to generate data visualizations, interactive data visualizations that represent how people search and what they search within our collection. So it's quite a broad remit, and there's a lot of possibilities there, I think.
Digital humanities was a bit of a buzzword a couple of years ago. Now everybody's talking about artificial intelligence, AI this, AI that. Do you want to talk, a little bit about the potential of AI and that connection of AI with the Digital Collections Catalyst?
Yeah, totally. I mean, AI is such a popular topic at the moment, and it can be divisive sometimes. I think when we hear about AI at the moment, it's really thinking about generative AI subject area, or projects, which is where someone puts something in and then they get a result back, which is text or image. And that's really just like one way that I think you can use artificial intelligence. So there's a broad range of AI sort of technologies and tools that are available. So things like natural language processing is something that's considered a technology, or machine learning. It doesn't necessarily have to be the output of your project, so you don't necessarily have to create a generative model, but you might apply an artificial technology tool in the process of developing what your outcome is.
Thank you. Which, I mean, AI is seeping into tools we use every day. So, you know, that little things like, you know, handwritten, you know, text correction, that sort of, you know, those kind of things have sped up scrolling through, you know, microfiche reels, you know, all these sorts of things allow you, maybe free up your time to do that really important historical analysis and that grunt work, which people do get value. You know, there's a satisfaction of, like, you know, winding on the fiche, you know, on the reel and going through it, but maybe it allows you to get to the heart of the matter maybe quicker with historical research.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. All right. So the panellists are here to answer questions, and we've got some questions flowing through already. I'll just probably just say and acknowledge, this might not come up in the live stream, but that acknowledging that there are technical issues with the live stream at the moment. It says in the chat. So just if you're watching this back, you know, our staff are working on a resolution for that. But there is a recording of this which will be made available later. And if you are watching this back later, hello, welcome. So we've got a few questions here. Feel free to put them through Slido, or I'll ask for in-person questions as well. I'll just, you are also able on Slido to upvote and say questions which really resonate with you. You can vote for that as well. I'll answer this, and so a lot of these are probably for me to, I can take these ones. There's a comment here about that $5,000 doesn't go particularly far, and then what is the expectation to produce for that? So the Letty Katz Award it's $5,000. It's the smallest amount of money out of all of the fellowship categories. I'll probably just be really clear as well with people, because it's a slight distinction that people sometimes slightly misunderstand. The research fellowships are money which you receive in terms of a stipend, which enables you to do the research component of a project you want to do. You don't have to write a book. There's no... It basically is the research component of something that you want to do. So it enables you to come in and do the research. What comes of that, a lot of the fellows that we had up on the screen, they wrote books years later after doing the research. So there's not this hard and fast. There are a few requirements we have, which include blog posts and a mid-year and end-of-year report, and a public participation in a public presentation called Research Reveals. But it's not like being a contractor or being engaged or being a grant recipient. You don't have to acquit your grant or do anything like that. So as a result of that, the expectations, obviously it's $5,000 is a lot less than $20,000. The expectations are less for that category. I would also just acknowledge that the amount of money going around to support, we realise these aren't living wages, they're just a drop in the ocean, but also that money is for researchers and people who rely on, going from project to project. This is quite important to sustain people as well. So we want to use that money effectively and support people to the greatest ability we can. So there's another question here which said the video that we played said you don't have to be an academic or a PhD to have a real chance of getting a fellowship, but many seem to have them. That's true. You don't have to be an academic, but there are many examples of, Rachel West-Captain had no academic background. She was a Monica Clare Fellow. Other John Oxley Library Fellowship recipients don't have PhDs or academic backgrounds. I would also I don't want to, just because someone says PhD or there's a lot of people who have PhDs or have honorary positions, where it's like they're not actually employed by the university, they're not getting any money. Sometimes that does denote a status and a lofty ideal, but I think there are a lot of people with PhDs who are trying to stitch together projects as well.
Actually, Gavin, could I just add to that? The whole question of whether a fellowship is a academic sounding title for an award, but in no way is the panels that I've been a part of favouring academic candidates. We're looking for diverse projects and diverse candidates, and we understand people have ideas and a project that they want to develop, and they can come from many different backgrounds, and many different professional backgrounds as much as anything else. And so one of the key things is also other means to support this project. If it turns out that someone's got a full-time academic job and this happens to be their current research interest, well, we're not going to be that keen about giving them a fellowship that could go to a much more deserving candidate. So on the one hand, yes, there's often as the question suggests, it's often the case that people do have doctorates or whatever. But in terms of the assessment process, it's the criteria that counts, and it's the quality of the project that counts. And often the academic background will work against someone, because if they've got a full-time academic job, why are they asking for our money? That's the question. So yeah, I wouldn't be put off at all by the absence of those kinds of academic credentials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's another question here that is about the balance between drawing on the collection and adding to the collection. I'll answer a little bit, but I'll throw to Robin as well. It is definitely, there's a requirement to kind of draw a connection in your application to using the collection in some way, but in a lot of instances, particularly with those silenced or less prominent stories, sometimes there are absences in the collection, and that can lead to collection development opportunities for us. So that is a two-edged sword, and that can be something that is really positive for us as well. I know that in different projects, the research and connection with members of the family or that sort of thing sometimes leads to opportunities to collect. Did you want to talk maybe about just some of the material you've come across and how it sparks those conversations, Robert?
I think the best example is my project with Sir Arthur, and with my first meeting with his son, Ross, he brought out a number of Christmas cards that the art department had made for his father. Every year, a member of the art department prepared a special greeting card for Sir Arthur, and that was a cartoon car image, and it depicted something important in the company, in his career. There was a special card, for example, when he got knighted. There was a card for the year when he was appointed to the Professional Tribunal for Parliamentarian Salaries and Awards, so that depicted him on the panel, the tribunal. There was a card for when the company became unified under a new name. So that was an example of these cards. And when Ross kind of spread them out on the table in front of me, my mouth dropped. It was such an incredible find. And when I brought them into the State Library, someone here said straight away, we'd like those in the collection. And my response was, Ross will never part with these are so precious. But the State Library is pretty convincing. They went and talked to Ross and convinced him it was the safest place for the cards. So they are now in the collection.
That's a wonderful example of something that we may not have if not for your
They're
fellowship.
unique, they're one-off, and they depict not only Sir Arthur's life but the story of the company as well. And the beauty was that each of those cards, there was a story behind them, and without knowing the story, the cards are pretty meaningless. So those stories have been added to the collection to go with the cards.
Thank you.
That's just a great example.
Yeah, yeah.
I've just recently on this project, I found something that no one knew anything about, that Thomas Dixon issued a little kind of medallion that went with the shoes, like a coin. And I wondered why that it would do that. It's an advertising gimmick, but it also, someone told me, people here might know, putting pennies into bags when they're sold a bag to bring good luck. Anyone know about that tradition? And apparently putting a coin with the shoes was a message of good luck. So I've got a couple of those coins now, or medallions, or whatever you call them, and they're going into the collection when I finish. Sorry.
Yeah, good luck, yeah.
Find a penny, pick it up, all day long you'll have good luck.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Robin. I'll just knock over these in text Slido questions, and then we'll do the microphone ones. This was an older question, so I'll do this one first. Are project outcomes, blog posts, etc., required to be delivered during the fellowship period, or can they be delivered at the conclusion afterwards? We have an interim sort of, in the funding arrangement, we have a requirement to do a blog post and a mid-project report, and then something at the end as well. So that doesn't need to be too arduous. It's not like a crazy amount of work to get a blog post which just documents what your research has been, and then that mid-year report is just a small update on what you've been doing, acknowledging that people's outcomes can change drastically as well in a couple months, because if it's not finished, if the project is still going, it might, at the final end point, might be very different from halfway through. There's a question about, can the fellowship be for a project that I've already started, yet see great benefit from the opportunity of working with State Library staff to expand and improve? Yes, absolutely. If you've commenced a project, and there's a tick box where we ask that question, it can be commenced already. It can't be a project which has commenced with ARC, funding, Australian Research Council funding, for example. But if you've done a personal project where you've interviewed people or you've started some research, that actually sometimes is proof of the concept that there's strength and validity to that project. There's a question here, do you grant fellowships to people with lived experience or just to those who are renowned within the academic realm? I suppose the assessment is brought back to the criteria, so I'd look at the criteria. Just because somebody has lived experience, that's not like reason to give a fellowship, but if they can draw that connection to the criteria, then definitely yes. What kind of research is expected to be completed at the end of the fellowship? It's whatever you want. What is delivered is basically a report on the research that you've done, but that research or where you've gone with that's purely up to you. We don't dictate how you do that research. That's very open-ended in terms of, some people really like to do an analytical kind of data-driven approach for everything. Some people, like Greer Townsend, was doing an investigation of collection materials by the emotions they elicit. So she was grouping collection items by their emotional resonance. So you can have very different approaches to how you do that research. Is there a duration limit? It's generally 12 months, the duration of that fellowship category. There's sometimes, but it's generally around 12 months. What type of referee should we use? One from our professions or from people we know? Why do we need this when we have letters of support? It's basically just to validate some of those things. Sometimes we just do need to check if somebody's saying, oh yes, I'll be doing this research and it will absolutely be taken up by a publisher and published. Sometimes we need to be able to, somebody might assert something in application. We need to be able to get the broadest knowledge base possible to confirm that some of the things that are in that application, that they are true and they stand up, so that we can make the best decision possible.
Gavin, can I
Yeah,
add
yeah,
to that as
jump
well? Yeah, I meant to say this before in answer to the earlier question, and that is about what makes for a good application. And the key thing about the criteria that we've been saying is your project needs to make sense. It needs to have heart and purpose and direction. It also needs to respond to the criteria. And just be wary of over-promising. You know, some people say, oh, it'll be this and it'll be that and it'll be this, and on top of that there'll be a publisher and there'll also be a website and there'll be a concert and it'll be, you know. And it's okay to have focused, tangible outcomes that are meaningful in themselves. They don't have to be overwhelmingly, you know, spectacular. And it's a sign of, you know, a project or an idea hasn't been fully developed when the outcomes are still a bit implausible. You know, so precise outcomes that aren't over-promised, I think would be a key to that aspect too.
Thanks, Jim. They keep coming. I'm almost finished them. Okay. Okay, so this is a question. While I would use resources from State Library for my research project, would the fellowship also support my research at other libraries? Yes, you can definitely draw on resources from other collections. We ask that there is some connection with State Library collections to make that a meaningful connection. One fellow they were looking at wartime. It was one of the QANZAC 100 fellowships and was looking at wartime experiences. And somebody asked them, because the National Archives is so good with a lot of service records and things like that, they asked, what's the benefit of the relative different collections for your research? And they said the National Archives is great to validate who was where, like what was what, the details and that veracity of information. But the we're a collecting archive, so we don't collect government records. We collect personal collections from people, organisations and businesses. We're also a legal deposit library, and we have collections from Queensland publications. But what our collection is able to provide is that social milieu, that context and that environment of what were people listening to in the 40s in Brisbane, you know, during the Second World War. What did Queen Street look like? So our photograph collection shows you what it looks like, where the ability to date something at a particular time and place was really good with National Archives collections. So you can definitely draw on multiple institutional collections.
Gavin,
Yeah.
could I just add there? When I did the Sir Arthur's project, his papers, excuse me, some of them were deposited in the State Library, but the bulk of them were actually sent to the National Archives in Canberra, like the library in Canberra. So I had funded, I used my stipend for a trip to Canberra and drew on the records in the the National Library.
Yeah, yeah. I think with digital technology, we realise that the barriers between collections are so much less now, and things like Trove, you know, break down those barriers that used to exist. Just a quick one, do you need to include the timeframes in the application? It really helps because it demonstrates that you've given thought to the different stages of the research project, and it also gives an indication that you've thought about that project and how you're going to pull it off. But I would just indicate that's timeframes for the research component. You don't have to tell us, I'll be installing the wall for the exhibition and the didactics and all of that sort of stuff. That's a secondary thing. So it's really the timeframes for that research component. Does anybody have an in-person question they'd like to ask with the microphone?
Thank you. My question is about it's the Queensland Memory Awards, but does it need to be a project that's focused on Brisbane? For example, obviously there's more to Queensland than just Brisbane. So if there's something that's more focused on, say, northern Queensland, would that be something that would be suitable to one of these Queensland Memory Awards?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think, I mean, the reality is, I think we do forget. We get a little bit caught up with ourselves in the southeast Queensland, and we think we are the state of Queensland. But as soon as you go out, you realise how, in our own world in Brisbane, we really are. So I think really encouraging regional and remote and rural people to apply is a really strong thing we want to encourage. And so there's avenues like this information night that we're streaming, but also the ability to get in touch through the email address fellowships@slq.qld.gov.au. I think that tyranny of distance is a thing, and hopefully with the fellowships and with that ability to ask questions, we can kind of lessen some of those imposts that distance create, because we are a library for the whole of Queensland and we're very conscious of trying to support that. So research projects that are either from people based in North Queensland or feature on that history, which is like so rich and open for possibility in North Queensland, we definitely encourage people to take a really broad geographic view of their topics.
Hi, that's working. I just wondered, do you, having never been involved with this sort of thing, if someone's looking to apply and they're unsure of how interesting this topic is, do you have any sort of mentoring or any advice or something on whether a subject is actually in line with the sorts of things you do, or is that just best to go and think? And as well as that, advice on what sorts of resources the library might have that you're blissfully unaware might connect to your subject closely.
Yeah, definitely. I just encourage you could get in touch via the contact points on the webpage. We noticed during this time of year, you can go into the reading room as well, and the staff on the counter they're there to help you. So there's all from 10 to 5, 7 days a week in the John Oxley Library reading room. There's a staffed reading room space where if you're interested in items and you say, I'm getting together an application, they'll go out of their way to help you source that material, and they can help you request and deal with that material. You can get in touch and say, look, I'm thinking about scoping this sort of project. We can't obviously give you give an unfair advantage to people who get in touch with us, but we can provide that sort of advice about how it applies under the guidelines. I'm also really, really conscious, and I don't think we do enough of this, to talk to members of the public about their research projects. I'm very conscious. We sometimes have, say, 100 applications across all the categories per year, and we can only support a fraction of them. So how do we support people who aren't get the money? Sometimes people have worthwhile research and worthwhile projects they want to do anyway. So how do we encourage that to happen, as well as formally funded and supported research projects? Because I think growing the pie that's in everybody's interest, and that ecosystem of deepening and understanding of Queensland history. So I'd encourage you to reach out through those channels. We can provide sort of that background advice, particularly if you're unsure or novice kind of with using the collection. And there's a reference query, it's called Ask Us. So you can put through a query and say, hi, somebody can do an hour of research on your behalf as well, which any Queensland resident can put through. So, I would say the email that Ask Us, it's a web form, and there's a phone number for that as well. So.
Not sure how to word this. Hello, thank you for doing what you do. The lived experience thing. I'm one of Australia's first drag kings, and I've trained up over 1,000 people in my time when I had my own corporation, and females are the anomaly within the queer community, and I've been featured in a documentary, I've been written in a book, I've been interviewed by the Australian Museum, and there's nothing on site. I applied for the Rainbow Fellowship last year, but there's still nothing. And it's like, I've got thousands and thousands of photographs and video footage and things like that. And it's like, well, how can I make my application stronger to get the attention of people in positions of authority when we're not represented?
It is. I mean, it's a difficult position for somebody to be in, to be a historical figure and an interpreter of their own lived history. So it's possible, but it's something not many people contend with. It's like writing a eulogy of your death. You know, you have to get outside yourself and see yourself, not as you see yourself, but as others see yourself. So writing, you know, history on yourself, that can be a difficult space to kind of to do that.
It's not just me. I had an incorporated organisation, and the thousands of people.
Oh yeah.
As well.
Oh
It's just me.
yeah. No. So that's if that sort of biography, but you're writing about other people. I think it's really honing in on those, because all of the applications are scored on those criteria. So it's looking at those criteria and how to really try and meet those as best you can. That's how the applications are assessed.
I might just pick up on that criteria aspect, because it is really at the heart of a successful application, that the criteria in the case of the one that I sit on, the John Oxley Fellowship, they're equally weighted. You know, there's 4 criteria. They're equally weighted, and the judges score them each application with a mark out of 5 based on each of the 4 criteria. You know, they might think that one criteria is worth a 3, the other one is worth a 4.5, the other one is worth a 2. And so we work our way through the different criteria categories, and that's the most important first step in the judging process. So that's why it's really important for applications to focus on meeting the criteria. And often it's, you know, it's a bit like, as you said before, Gavin, a bit like a job application. You know, you need to demonstrate that you're a good fit for the position by showing that you can do all the different aspects of the job. It's exactly the same. You know, there's 4 criteria in the case of the John Oxley Fellowships, and each of them has a number of dot points, and you just demonstrate in responding to those criteria that you know the value of your project, you know, and how it responds to those expectations. So the initial question about life experience, you know, if your life experience is rich and it has got these dimensions to it that relate to the criteria, showing that you can deliver on that is the key. It's not just saying, look, I've got this, and you know. And therefore I'm qualified. It's not just a question of qualification, it's a question of stepping forward and showing through the criteria how you plan to culminate. Yeah. There's beautiful visual, yeah. Well, I guess that's the key point, is the criteria is the opportunity to show how you would deliver, yeah.
That's Len Waters?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I've developed a style of painting that blind people can see.
Oh.
And because of him, I've had the most eclectic career in Australia.
We just have talked about the criteria, so it's on the website, but I'll just, because there is a consistency between all of the fellowship categories, so I'll just quickly talk about we're talking criteria, but just to sort of step you through that, because it might just be worth, you know, imparting that. The first one is around significance, and all of these are adjusted for the context of what that fellowship subject area is, but that's that significance to that to that topic. So that's the creation of new knowledge. So say for the John Oxley Library Fellowship, which is about Queensland history generally, it's about creation of new knowledge about Queensland history, relevant and timely research, project activities and outcomes. So it's like, what's the historical significance of the topic that you're in connection to that fellowship category's subject area. The second one's collection, use and creation. So that's a little bit what we talked about with Robin, where significant use of the collections at State Library, it supports our collecting priorities, and First Nations collecting, LGBTQI plus collecting, culturally and linguistically diverse collecting, they're all collecting priorities that we prioritise, actively seeking collecting that material. And then also the potential for increasing public knowledge around State Library's collection. So that's in that collection, use and creation criterion. Then impact, which I know if you're in the academic world, that's a bit of you shudder when you hear that word, but it is looking at the research that you're going to do, how's that going to resonate with people? You care deeply about that project, but how is it going to touch the lives of others? So it's looking at that potential to inspire interest in that topic, ability to promote new knowledge and tangible outcomes, and the level of benefit. And then the last one is just the viability. How likely is it that you're able to do what you're saying you're doing? Are there clearly defined scope? is it realistic use of resources? A lot of people say, oh, do this and this and this and this, but it's like, will that actually happen, or are you just trying to get your foot in the door, which is like all power to you. But sometimes it is about looking at what that person has done. Does this make sense? Like if they have a publishing track record of having the material published, well, that makes it more likely that there will be a published outcome of their research, which increases the impact of that project. So in concert, we look at those 4 broad criteria in the context of the subject matter that their fellowship category is in. We're getting close to time. So is there any... Yep, got a couple questions. Yep.
Thank you. Just curious, is there a way of 2 people to apply for 1 fellowship? Is that something like a collaborative thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking straight at Matthew in front of you, and he literally did that with the John Oxley Fellowship. He and Louise Martin Chu did a joint fellowship. Yep. So that is definitely possible.
And does it matter which one?
No, they're all possible. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a very pragmatic question about the application process. I guess I'm struggling to decide which one to apply for because they're all Queensland history related. You know, I have a project and it could be also in other ones. And I guess it happens often that the most coveted one is the John Oxley one and it's got the greater funds, but it's also easier to apply for something that's slightly broader. The two pragmatic questions which hopefully help me decide and probably others is there more applicants for the John Oxley one compared to some of the other ones? Is there a larger percentage of applicants for one than for the others? And the second question is when you're selecting, say, the John Oxley one, but there's a really great applicant that misses out, but their project is very connected to queer history or to like a heritage listed site, would you consider them for another category, or is it only just one category that somebody can apply for the one project with?
Yeah, you can, in Smarty Grants, you can select multiple ones that it applies for. We used to have to, you had to like submit a separate one, but now it's just like a tick box. So you can say, and we're very conscious that we do have the Rainbow Fellowship, we have the Monica Clare Fellowship, but like an Indigenous researcher can be the John Oxley Fellow. You can have a queer project as the John Oxley Fellowship. We don't want to, that's just not the box that, you know, the queer stuff kind of happens in the Rainbow Fellowship. It is all categories. I think it does really tell when somebody, you can, if they really, really wanted one category and then they're like, oh yeah, plus this one, because sometimes the project really clearly meets one area's criteria, but the other one, it's just like, you can tell they're just like putting it in just because. So you are able to submit unique applications as well. I think it's looking at if you're going to apply, it is definitely true. The Oxley has the most applications in it by terms of volume. And other ones which are more specific in nature, that is more difficult. And it is generally that if somebody does one of the specific subject area ones and then clicks the Oxley, it's more applicable to the Oxley than the other way around, where if you've just done a general Oxley one and then you try and shoehorn it into one of the specific ones, it's like sometimes not 100% there. But also all of those applications are collated and presented, like the selection panels are different for the different fellowship categories, and they will see everything that's applicable under that category. So, and there is a degree of looking across the categories to see that, oh, this person applied for this fellowship category and this fellowship category. You know, what do the different panels think comparatively about the merits? I think we're pretty close to time. Oh, sure. So there is the potential for, in the John Oxley Library Fellowship, Mark Lauk, who was on that video, and Anna Johnson previously, have undertaken the John Oxley Fellowship in an honorary capacity. So there's no money attached. But what you get is everything else with the fellowship. So you get access to the fellowship lounge, which is we haven't talked much about that, but that's on level 4 up at State Library. So if you've been in the reading room on level 4, that's economy. Then, you have the lounge, But the benefits are that it's a workspace that, you can use. You can come and go. You don't have to go into the reading room with general public, but you use the back of house facilities with staff, so you're kind of co-located with us. Also, you've got a workspace. You've got to bring your own laptop and device, but other than that, there's printing facilities. There's those kind of office kind of things which might help as well. There's the honour. You can indicate in your application if you would be willing to undertake the Oxley Fellowship in an honorary capacity. And some people say, no way, I need to eat and I need money. I'm not going to do it. And other people are like, I would. My main interest is in pursuing this research and making sure that it happens, and that bursary amount isn't as important to me. So it's just that ability to support the project and the research to happen in various ways. If you do have any other questions, I'd just like to point you to the Queensland Memory Awards page again, which has all of the guidelines, category information, a lot of the resources that we've mentioned. The closing date, so put this in your diaries, the closing date is on People's Day, on ECA week, so on People's Day at midnight, Wednesday the 14th of August. So we have set that date, so you've got a little bit of time to get your applications together. The application process happens entirely online through a platform called Smarty Grants. So you can half start your application, save it and come back to it. So that enables you to see the progress of your submission. Judging takes place in August and September. Applicants are notified of the outcomes in early October, and we'll be announcing the winners publicly at the Queensland Memory Awards ceremony, which happens probably around early November 2024. The website for contact details to get in touch with for more information. The recording will be available soon, so people can access that. It's through our Vimeo account that they can get that. The other thing I'd just like to point out, I think there's a link here. So the Monica Clare Research Fellowship, we held last year a separate session just for, and it is an identified fellowship opportunity, so you have to be Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander person to undertake that research. But a colleague, Olivia Robinson, facilitated a session talking about information about prospective applicants for that research category. So I just encourage people to go and look at that legacy recording if they're interested. I'd like to also just start to wrap up tonight by thanking the people who make these fellowships possible. In a lot of the examples, we receive philanthropic funding which supports and makes possible those bursary amounts. So I'd like to thank the Saganto Foundation for supporting the Monica Clare Research Fellowship, the John Allpass Charitable Foundation, who supports the Queensland Business Leaders Hall of Fame Fellowship, the late Dr. Stanton Malik, OAM ED, and his late daughter, Professor Jill Malik, who support the Letty Katz Fellowship, the Royal National Agricultural Association of Queensland, thank you for coming on board, for supporting the ECA Fellowship, and also the Heritage Branch Department, Environment, Science and Innovation for the Heritage Register Research Fellowship as well. So thank you so much. Those donations are made possible through our Queensland Library Foundation. So they do great work, and I'd like to plug the work of the Queensland Library Foundation. Other than that, I'd just like to thank our panel for being so generous with their time and answering questions. Thank you so much, Jeff, Shanoa and Robin. Thank you. And good luck with your applications, good luck with your research, and I hope to see you soon. Thank you very much and good night.
A research fellowship with State Library of Queensland opens the door
to make your idea a reality.
Our fellows have gone on to win awards,
Be published,
develop podcasts,
receive international press coverage, and so much more.
Uncover the stories of Queensland through our rich collections and share them with the world.
Where will your fellowship take you? Apply now.